What if the biggest threat to Meghan Markle's public image was never a royal insider, never a tabloid editor, never even the palace itself, but the growing trail of people who once stood beside her and then quietly disappeared from the picture? Because when you stop looking at each controversy individually and start lining them up side by side, something startling begins to emerge. A pattern, a sequence, a story that seems to repeat itself over and over again. And according to explosive claims now being discussed across royal circles and Hollywood alike, the question is no longer why people leave. The real question is why so many leave in exactly the same way.
Conspiracy and melodrama. That's how Harry and Meghan have described Tom Bower's explosive new book about.
Well, it's all about how they're going to make their money and fame and fortune. It has nothing to do with the truth. I mean, there's those three programs.
She couldn't understand why she wasn't more important and wasn't in control of everything. And that's why, of course,
I think they have to appeal to the youth of Britain, who are not natural monarchists. They wanted to show that they were... So when Meghan came along into the scene, I just thought, this is fascinating. How is this going to play out? To tell the truth, I spoke to very few.
When Harry is bowled over by Meghan, is desperately in love, and already is talking about met him, she could easily, because she's an extraordinarily good performer in those circumstances, she's an actress.
I want to know what happened before. What was her life about that would lead her into that interview where she says that Harry's birthright, like he's a prince.
Why not?
Well, because it doesn't work.
Why can't you just say, they can't use HRH in public?
The number that has people talking is 43. Just 43 people reportedly attending Prince Harry's own flagship charity event in 2025. Think about that for a moment. This was supposed to be one of the most important projects of Harry's post-royal life. His passion, his purpose, his independent legacy. Yet that number immediately raised eyebrows. Not because it was small, but because it seemed to symbolize something much bigger happening behind the scenes. A shrinking circle, a fading influence, a growing gap between public image and public enthusiasm. Then comes April 2023. Meghan signs with WME, arguably the most powerful talent agency in Hollywood. On the surface, it looked like a major victory. The Duchess entering a new chapter, a fresh beginning, access to elite opportunities, Hollywood power, media connections. Everything appeared perfectly positioned for a dramatic comeback, but insiders would later suggest something far more intriguing. According to claims circulating behind closed doors, the real value wasn't necessarily about finding Meghan new opportunities. It was about protecting her from damaging ones, protecting her from negative headlines, protecting her from stories that could threaten the carefully managed narrative surrounding her public image. For a while, that protection appeared to work. Then came Thanksgiving 2023. Suddenly, whispers started spreading, reports of frustration, alleged dissatisfaction, claims of tense conversations, expectations that weren't being met, questions that weren't being answered. And then January 2024 arrived. What happened next remains heavily disputed, but the rumors refuse to die. Some sources claim Meghan expected a detailed roadmap for her future. Others suggest there were disagreements over strategy. Some believe personalities simply collided. Whatever happened behind those closed doors, one thing became impossible to ignore. The relationship never seemed to look the same afterward. Publicly, everything remained calm. Privately, the speculation exploded. Because if there was no problem, why did so many damaging stories suddenly begin appearing afterward? Why did negative headlines become harder to stop? Why did criticism start reaching publications that previously seemed reluctant to touch certain topics? Those questions refused to go away.
Again, Meghan Markle has been dumped again by her agent.
And that brings us to one of the most fascinating claims in this entire story. Multiple observers noted that after January 2024, stories that had previously struggled to gain traction suddenly found an audience. Reports about business tensions, questions about projects, discussions about partnerships, conversations about performance. Was it coincidence? Or was something larger changing? Nobody can definitively prove it, but the timing continues to fuel speculation. Then another chapter opens. A chapter involving two of the world's most recognizable celebrities, David and Victoria Beckham. Once upon a time, this looked like a genuine friendship, not a publicity arrangement, not a temporary alliance, a real relationship built over years. The Beckhams attended the royal wedding. Victoria reportedly helped with Frogmore Cottage. The families appeared connected both publicly and privately. Everything looked solid. Then something happened.
Ari Emanuel. And there have been rumors about this for months.
The story traces back to the 2018 Invictus Games. According to accounts later documented by royal commentators, restrictions allegedly emerged regarding photographs involving David Beckham and Prince Harry. The reasoning remains controversial. The interpretations remain disputed. But what happened afterward proved even more dramatic. Claims surfaced that Meghan suspected Victoria Beckham of leaking information to the press. The accusation reportedly created enormous tension. The shocking twist? Later reports suggested the supposed source of those leaks may not have been Victoria at all. If true, that means a friendship could have been severely damaged by something that was never accurate in the first place. Think about that. One misunderstanding, one accusation, one fracture. And suddenly, a friendship years in the making begins collapsing.
I understand that drove you nuts. Why?
Well, look, mate, you can't.
What happened afterward only fueled more speculation. David Beckham gradually appeared increasingly aligned with Prince William. Public comments praising William drew attention. Observers noticed. Commentators discussed it endlessly. And once again, people started asking the same question. Why do these relationships keep ending the same way? Why does enthusiasm so often transform into distance? Why do allies become former allies? Why do supporters become silent? Then comes perhaps the most explosive chapter of all. October 2018. Jason Knauf, not a journalist, not a critic, not a royal commentator, not a tabloid source, an insider, someone trusted, someone close, someone who worked directly within the operation. And then he submitted a formal complaint, a documented complaint, a complaint that would remain controversial for years.
Beckham, believe it or not, was ringing up journalists on various newspapers and leaking stories about Meghan and...
The allegations were serious, very serious. Claims regarding workplace behavior, claims regarding treatment of staff, claims that would later become some of the most heavily debated accusations surrounding Meghan's time within the royal household. What made this especially damaging wasn't simply the content, it was the source. This wasn't coming from outside, it was coming from inside. And when Meghan eventually responded publicly, the situation became even more polarized. Supporters viewed the accusations as unfair attacks. Critics viewed them as validation of long-standing concerns. The divide deepened, the mystery grew, and perhaps most intriguing of all, the palace investigation that followed has never fully been revealed to the public. The conclusions remain hidden, the findings remain sealed, the answers remain out of reach. Which means the debate never truly ended. Instead, it evolved into something larger, a lingering question hanging over every new controversy that followed. Then came the money trail, and this is where the story stops looking like isolated incidents and starts looking like a repeating cycle. Because after the palace complaints, after the Beckham fallout, after the whispers surrounding former allies, another pattern emerged: major contracts arriving with enormous fanfare and then ending with uncomfortable silence. The first major shockwave came from Spotify. The deal was reportedly worth millions. The promise sounded revolutionary. New voices, new conversations, new influence. It was presented as proof that Harry and Meghan could build a media empire completely independent of the royal family. But as time passed, expectations and reality appeared to drift further apart. The output remained limited. The momentum slowed. Then, suddenly, the partnership was over. What truly sent shockwaves through both Hollywood and royal circles wasn't the ending itself, it was what followed. Public comments from Spotify executive Bill Simmons exploded across headlines. His choice of words instantly became one of the most quoted moments in the entire Sussex business story. Suddenly, critics who had been whispering felt emboldened. Supporters scrambled to defend the couple. And once again, people noticed something familiar. Another enthusiastic partner had become another former partner.
Jason Knauf, now however it's pronounced, he was the person who filed the complaint back in 2018.
Then attention shifted toward Netflix. Once again, massive expectations. Once again, huge headlines. Once again, a partnership positioned as a historic new chapter. The documentary generated attention because it centered directly on the royal conflict the public was already obsessed with. But after the initial explosion of interest, questions began emerging about what would come next. Where was the long-term cultural impact? Where were the breakthrough projects everyone expected? Why did so many announcements seem bigger than the results that followed? Critics argued the pattern looked familiar. Big launch, massive publicity, quiet slowdown, then another transition. Whether fair or unfair, the narrative kept growing stronger because every new development appeared to reinforce it.
Jason used to be communications secretary to William, Kate, Harry and Meghan.
Then came the branding controversy. American Riviera Orchard was supposed to represent a new lifestyle empire. Products, identity, expansion, reinvention, but suddenly legal complications emerged regarding trademark issues. The carefully planned rollout appeared to hit unexpected obstacles. The rebrand that followed raised even more questions. Was it simply strategic evolution, or was it emergency damage control disguised as a fresh beginning? Observers debated endlessly. Yet what caught attention wasn't only the trademark issue, it was what happened around it. Senior staff departures, communications executives leaving, leadership changes arriving one after another. By this point, the list had grown so long that even neutral observers struggled to ignore it.
Described them as lazy effing grifters, and then went on to spray gun them a bit more. I mean, he's got a point, isn't he? They got
18 departures. That number echoed through royal reporting circles like an alarm bell. Every organization experiences turnover. Every workplace loses employees. But critics argued that 18 senior departures pointed towards something deeper. Some former insiders allegedly described difficult environments. Others stayed silent. And perhaps that silence became one of the most fascinating details of all, because silence can sometimes reveal more than public statements. The louder the controversy grew, the quieter many former associates became. Then there was Jessica Mulroney, perhaps the most personal departure in the entire story. Not a business executive, not a palace aide, a friend. A real friend from before the royal spotlight. Someone whose children participated in Meghan's wedding. Someone who appeared deeply woven into her private life. Yet when controversy surrounded Jessica, the friendship seemingly disappeared from public view almost overnight. Critics called it abandonment. Supporters called it necessary distance. But either way, the timing fueled endless speculation. Another close relationship. Another separation. Another chapter ending under difficult circumstances. As the years passed, the spotlight increasingly shifted toward Prince Harry himself, because behind every contract, every controversy, every departure stood the same question. Did Harry fully understand what was happening around him? He had left one of the most powerful institutions on earth believing he could build something greater on his own terms. Yet 6 years later, critics pointed to shrinking partnerships, damaged relationships, staff turnover, and declining public enthusiasm as evidence that the dream had not unfolded as planned. The most devastating possibility wasn't that Harry made the wrong decision, it was that he might still believe everything was working exactly as intended. And that is why Tom Bower's claims continue generating so much attention. Not because every allegation has been proven, not because every accusation is accepted, but because the story keeps returning to the same unresolved mystery. Why do so many supporters eventually become former supporters? Why do so many partnerships begin with excitement and end with silence? Why does the same pattern appear again and again across friendships, business deals, staff relationships, and public alliances? The answers remain hidden behind sealed investigations, private conversations, untold stories, and unanswered questions. The Beckham story isn't fully resolved, the palace findings remain unreleased, Jessica Mulroney remains silent, and perhaps most intriguingly of all, the famous Zoom call story Bill Simmons hinted at still hasn't been publicly told. Until those missing pieces emerge, this story remains unfinished. And sometimes the most explosive chapter is the one that hasn't been revealed yet.